The opportunity some 20 years ago, how did it get put? Was it on a platter? How did you find out there was an opportunity at the Warriors?
I didn't expect it to happen. Interviewed a couple of times. Remember my final interview, it was, well, this is the final interview. If you get the job, you won't be going home. And that was the statement that I was told. So I left my family in Australia for 10 weeks. So I had ambitions to be a coach. I love coaching, still do. So there was only a number of jobs in the world that you could do this. So you don't sort of turn away from opportunities like that. I was 33, so I was very young as a coach. I was a very, very underwhelming player of the game. So you got to remember, I wasn't a high aspirational rugby league player. So I invested a lot of time as a coach anyway, and I just played social footy on the side. So I'd done 6 or 7 years of coaching it from all the way through rep footy to reserve grade to assistant first grade. So I'd done a lot of coaching, so I knew that's where my forte was.
So where do you start to rebuild a side? If you go back, some 20 years now, when this task was put into your hands, where did you start?
I was confident that I could make players better. What I didn't realise was how talented the team and the rugby league players at that time, they were very, very talented. You were one of a very talented group of boys that all came through together. The World Cup was on at that stage, if you remember, the 2000 World Cup. So I was ringing players. I was in the middle of the night. I was staying up to try and find players to sign them to play for the Warriors. And when I'd ring people and say, oh, it's Daniel Anderson, the New Zealand Warriors coach, they go, who? Who are you? What do you mean? What are you talking about? So
Mate,
they didn't even know what was happening.
That brings back the memories, because I was over there. I was a young, I had a bit more hair on my head back then. There was a few of us that were playing for the Tour Samoa side against the likes of Kevin Campion and co. A lot of your boys were over there, and that was it. I got a phone call from you. So you were working overtime, but obviously, because relationships with you, and especially first impression, must have been huge, because you had that way with the players. That was the initial thing in terms of feeling the love.
Well, that's the part of the role. You sort of naturally feel it. I'm not a matey coach. That's never what I've been, a technical coach, but I had a lot of respect for you young men, and I loved coaching, and I just found it very comfortable talking to people in those days. So, I can tell a story of one of the best stories of all of them was Francis Meli, and I watched some vision of him playing for Brisbane Souths, and I went, geez, this bloke is great, And, he tried to go for intercepts all the time, and I'm going, well, we'll have to change that. And then I rang him in England, and hey, Francis, Daniel Anderson, New Zealand Warriors coach. Who are you? I said, oh, mate, I'd like you to, sign with the Warriors. And he went, yeah, well, okay. How do I know it's you? And I said, okay, how are we going to solve this problem? So I drove out to West Auckland to where his home was, and I was on the phone to him at this stage. And in those days, it was faxes too. We didn't send emails. So I sent a fax of the contract offer to his hotel in England. And then I went with the original and knocked on the door and went, hi, is this Francis Meli's house? And his sister came out, and I gave her the contract and the phone, and she went, yep. Looks like the same as what you're talking about, Francis. Yep, there's a bloke standing here. He says he's the coach, and that was how we signed Francis Meli. I literally had to drive out and meet people. Did the same with Ali Lautiti. Met the whole family. Had the banana cake, one of the famous Kiwi traditions with the chocolate icing.
Yes.
I was in a room with a dozen people before, Ali's father said, and yes, he will be staying with you.
Yeah. And I wasn't even sure of how much of the squad you inherited or how much you had to go after and get. Did you have an understanding of the ratio? And then who were the key signings for you, maybe through hindsight, that you've picked that up early on?
Well, obviously, Stacey was the first, Monty. I met him very, very early. It would have been like the first few days I met Stacey. There were a couple of boys that are injured, so they weren't at the World Cup. Arwen was one of them. Shontaine Harpy was a young boy who was also there. I remember those boys. I remember watched the junior Kiwis versus the junior Kangaroos, and Motu Tony was the 5'8", and I think we immediately got Motu Rex Ohio brought Lance up and said, "This is the best teenage boy," and so he was there. And then the rest of you boys, that was it. We lost Joe Vangana. We lost a lot of players too. Lost at least 7 or 8 players through miscommunication or because they were free agents. They found a better position to go to. So it was a really interesting first 6 weeks, 8 weeks. But then the latest, the real late signatures. Well, obviously Kevin Campion was an enormous signature, and he was, we literally paid for his departure from Warrington. In those days, it was one of the first clubs ever to pay a fee to get a player out of a contract. And Ivan Cleary was, one of the real final pieces that came on board. He was wonderful. So, we had a great balance in that initially. And then probably for 2002, when we got PJ Marsh, it sort of gave us another weapon. We sort of added quality players to an already really strong base.
Aggression was one thing. The sandpit has really popped up a number of times with a number of different people. Yeah. What was it about the sandpit? And what was it about that technique? Was that a Parramatta thing? Was it a Daniel Anderson thing? Because stinging in defence, shoulders was one thing. But also you mentioned the skill in terms of ability, but about you trying to harness that and really bring that through under fatigue in the con games.
The sandpit was a physical. We had to get our physicality right. We had players, and we had players like Richard Villasanti that were very, very powerful. We had to showcase our strengths against opposition teams. We weren't a fancy team. We had to be provocative. That was our style. And you would remember that we always went well against Brisbane because Brisbane were a team full of big players who like to bully opposition. And we actually thrived against them because we knew we couldn't be bullied. So that the sandpit was technical. It's easy, and it's also softer to fall on sand than it is on grass. So there was a slight method in the madness that you would be comfortable when you fell down. But of course, we were running as hard as we could into each other. But we had those bodysuits.
You say we, so as in you were doing the running as well.
Okay, well, I don't recall ever carrying the ball up like yourself in the sandpit. And the con games was just you had to put people under stress. You still do. People have to be put under stress, and they have to be put under pressure so they know what it feels like, and then they know how to deal with it. But we still do it today. We still want to do it today with young 15-year-olds. Is put them under duress in a game so they recognise that feeling and that uncomfortable position mentally that they're in, and then how do I remedy that? How do I still work and deliver high quality performance when I don't feel very well? And that's why the great players are the great players in our game, and they win premierships and they win origins and they win test matches because they can handle those moments.
There was moments when I would hear you laugh out loud because of the joy you'd get when people would just really scheme, compete and try and beat each other, and to get that carry on out of you. I mean, how much did you enjoy watching the guys at training?
Oh, tremendously. One story for you, and I don't know if you remember it, but if we had the Hibiscus Coast, and I went up there and watched it, and there was that big boy there playing there, and I said, why don't you come down to training with us, Yes. You're fit to Paliacina. And I said to him, mate, we're playing, I think we're playing Adam Cuthbert or Adam Cuthberts. And I said, mate, this guy offloads the ball ad nauseum. Every tackle he wants to offload the ball. So I'm going to get you, Fitzer, to pretend you're him today at training. And I want you to offload the ball whenever you run up into our team. And he said, yeah, okay, coach, yeah, I can do that. And then I went to you guys, who was our team. This was a star-studded team. And I went, that young bloke there who's 18, he's going to offload the ball every time he comes up to carry it. And I said, so you got to stop him. And you all, yeah, no worries. Easy. He's just a kid. And he offloaded the ball every time. You couldn't stop him. He was just a kid. I went, all right, mate, you're playing. And that was it. He was away then. So those training sessions, I used to laugh. Yeah, you're right. Like when players embarrassed each other through sheer skill or vision or intelligence, you gotta love that, don't you? As a coach, I'm sure you boys loved watching each other when you do it to the opposition. When I discuss skill sets of players, I use the golf bag analogy that you've got so many sticks in your golf bag, and we had Villa who had run and tackle. There wasn't a lot else to Villa, but he was good at those two golf sticks that he had in his bag. Stacey had about 28 golf sticks in his bag. He had the
Yes.
step, the swerve, the kick, the chip, he was the leader. He was the character. And then you had Sione, who was a back rower, who had he had 14, 15 golf clubs in his bag as well. So I loved watching boys
Mate,
absolutely embarrass each other with their personality.
there was no 3 years like 2001 to 2003. So I'm just going to go through the milestone years and just get some thoughts. Of course, I remember the game at Melbourne. We drew. We were heads down. But you came running on to let us know that we did enough to make the playoffs for the first time. To make the playoffs for the first time, how was that in your mind as a coach?
Oh, it was thrilling. It was thrilling. We got pounded the next week. We were hopeless. Remember, we were already done. We were already excited. So it was a dream for a lot of us. We didn't expect it, and we got a bit of a sniff. We had that run where we couldn't win three in a row, and then we won four in a row, and we said, "Geez, we're almost there now." So it was very, very exciting. Still vividly remember as you said, the big milestone. That was a huge milestone game, it's funny. I still remember the beating we copped against Parramatta, and I think that sort of drove me as a coach to make sure that we were not going to be beaten like that again if given another opportunity in a big game.
And you mentioned big games, none bigger than the grand final, and against that mob that you've got your hat on your head, and I'm sure it would have been a hard time the other week when they celebrated that with you around. The GF, mate, what an achievement. Do you look back now and in hindsight, and obviously hindsight is something that we can't always act on, but would you have changed much, Ando?
No, it's one of those things. I don't remember a lot of it, to be
Neither do I.
Monty. I really don't. I didn't watch a lot of the game. Grand finals turn on a half a dozen moments. I did come across Luke Phillips, who was the fullback for the Roosters, and we had that set play where he played very flat in the line. And remember, we said, right, if you get the ball, kick it early, kick it for Francis. And Luke Phillips actually told me when I was home, he goes, I was gone. He said Francis was getting the ball and the ball bounced back towards him at the very last bounce. And he said, I got a finger to it before he got a finger to it. He said, that's how close it was. That's about the only thing from that, it was great. The Cronulla game, which was the grand final qualifier, because that was the famous, if you got a Kiwi passport, you got 4 tickets, and it was a home game for us. Remember, there was no Cronulla supporters there. There were Warriors and Kiwi supporters, so it was almost a home game in Sydney. That was wonderful. Who can't forget the crowds when we came back into Auckland Airport after the Cronulla game, where we made the grand final, and we couldn't get out of the airport. It was 5,000-10,000 people there.
Yeah.
And we were stuck. So it was a wonderful experience. And 2003 playoff run, we caught fire at the start of that. If you remember, from the Bulldogs game to the Golden Point game against basically the Golden Point game against the Canberra Raiders. And I think we really felt then that we blew that semi-final. We thought we were going to get there. Maybe we got ahead of ourselves, and that was unfortunate. But
well, you mentioned some of your favourite players of all time. Some of them you've got connections with. So who were some of those guys, and why were they your favourites?
I tell players right now, and I say this to young front rowers, Jerry Sisu, in my opinion, would be my all-time best team. He was an absolute gentleman off the field, a lovely human being, great guy, great sense of humour. But on the field, he was a brute, and he epitomised the warrior. He was hard to handle. He was scary, intimidating, and he knew what his job was. His job was to take on the other teams, and no one liked playing against him. I still allude to that right now with young front rowers because there's a lot of really nice, lovely young kids. But when they cross the white line, they got a job to do. It's still a game of intimidation, rugby league, so it has that element. So I expect our young throwers to be brutes on the field, and that's the game.
Do you expect your front rowers to be chip and chase merchants like Jerry Sealsea? I remember you picking him up a few times. Did you give him that licence in the end or not?
No, he never had a license. None of you guys had a license. There was a I don't know who was dealing with it, but there was a fake license going around about chip and chase because Stacey was the only one that was allowed to chip and chase. Webby did it in the big game at Broncos that time, and he was all right at it too.
You mentioned one of the most resilient, tough front rows of all time in the club's history. But, you know, in terms of the finesse or other attributes that you used to love watching, Coach, who are they and what were some of the skill sets they showcased?
Well, obviously, Clinton Torpy was close to the best centre in the world in 2003. Again, he had that footwork. And I remember, you would have remembered, Monty, we used to do an opposed session, and he was in the reserve grade team. And I said, all right, well, we're going to go pretty hard at it now. And he scored 3 tries against the first grade team. I said, well, if you're going to score 3 tries against us, you might as well be in our team. And that was his start. And he did that regularly. You know, he was horrible through speed gates. He could not run. He was running slower than front rowers through speed gates when you did the testing. But on the field, I don't know if I ever saw anyone catch him, and he ran everyone down. He just had that incredible desire and determination on the footy field. And he used to make lots of mistakes. You know, he'd do my head in as a coach. He dropped simple passes, and he was telling stories. Remember, there was that contraption where I put that around their neck, and they had the 2 straps on their hands to keep their hands up. He told me about this at dinner with my mum only about a month ago. I forgot all about it.
Yep.
And he said, well, I had to run around at training with that on. I said, well, you should have had your hands up. Yep. That was the rule. So he was great.
92 games. Which one stick out for the most in your mind, regardless of whether it was a milestone game or not?
First win at Central Coast, where we played the Northern Eagles. And if you remember, we had 3 pretty high-profile supporters on that trip, and we went back after the game to a pub, and then you had an argument between Mad Butcher, Eric Watson, and our other owner, who wanted to shout. They were trying to fight over who was the richest
Mark
and who was going to shout us. Mark Hodgson, you remember? And, no, it's mine. I'm shouting. We're all selling them. We don't care.
Hey, we're good.
You guys, we're okay. It's free for us. So, that loved having the Mad Butcher around constantly. I loved our games against the Broncos. I really did. I just thought that we really we had the wood on them as a team. They didn't like playing us. I remember another coach in that era once. He said to me, have you ever watched the teams you play against the week after? I said, no, of course not. Why would I? He goes, they never win.
Yeah.
They never win. Have you seen that? Well, he said, the Warriors gave them such a physical battering and a physical test that the week after they could not respond. They couldn't get up again. So that was, it was a backhanded compliment that our style of playing, how provocative we were and how aggressive we were, took its toll on our opposition, and they all lost the week after they played us. So that was a nice thing for someone to say.
Once a Warrior, always a Warrior. Ando, just thank you so much for the legacy you left behind here at the Warriors and the contribution to the Jumper Men.
Thanks very much, Mons. I enjoyed my time and enjoyed chatting with you today.
From one legend to another legend, next week on the show, Once a Warriors, it will be Warrior number 1, Dean Bell. Join us here, same time, same place.